Hello everyone, it's Lindsay, and today I'm doing another process video working through the Free to Flourish kit by Illustrated Faith, and this was written by Becca Blankenship, and I am on, I believe, day 8 here, and it's talking about free to trust, and we are working in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, and it says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your paths." So I'm pulling out the supplies I'm going to be using for this entry, and I'm going to show you how I do some shading techniques with these Faber Castell Pitt Artist brush pens. So I always pull out the colors for each kit and just keep them in the bag from the kit, and that way I'm not having to dig through my stash of pens. I'm also going to be using some of the Wordfetti stickers from Illustrated Faith. So I have these smaller brush pens, not the big stamping ones, but I would like to also get the big ones. These are kind of addictive once you've started getting them. So I'm taking this large floral from the stamp set, and I'm going to create a little cluster of flowers down in the left-hand corner of this page. So I'm going to show you some masking techniques as we get this down. So I'm stamping off of the page a little bit, and then here I have a piece where I stamped it on some copy paper, cut it out, and then I'm just going to lay that over the image I just stamped, and that way it'll protect it while I stamp down the next flowers. That way they're not intersecting. It looks like the flowers are kind of stacked on top of each other. And I'm also going to mask off the wording with some copy paper. I don't want to make the same mistake I did in my last journaling process video where I covered up the words. So I want to keep this just to the margin for this particular entry. You can see here I started to hesitate and it started to stamp, but once I stamped over it and got the coloring down, you couldn't see that mistake. And here's where I realized I needed even more of the masks for this flower, so I'm just stamping them down on this copy paper, and here you can see I'm fussy cutting out those images, and I'm going to now cover up all the stamping that I've done. And this looks kind of complicated, but it really isn't. You just have to think whatever you stamp down first is what's actually going to be sitting on the top of the pile of stamping that you're doing. And you'll kind of see when I get all done what I mean by that. So you can see that flower to the left is on top, and now everything else is underneath it. So I'm just going through and covering them up, randomly stamping these to kind of fill in a cluster in that corner there. I am using STAIS-ON ink today. That does seem to bleed through onto the page. If that bothers you, you could definitely prep the page with gesso first. But my stamp pad is getting a little bit dried out, so it doesn't seem to bleed as bad, so I'm not overly concerned with it. And I can cover bleed through on the other side with acrylic paint and things like that. You could also use Post-it notes to create these masks, and that way they would be a little bit sticky and you wouldn't have to worry about them moving while you're stamping. But I just kind of lay it down on there and am careful when I stamp down, and it seems to work just fine. And so that should be the last flower there. So here I've gone ahead and pulled out a lot of different colors. I will link all the numbers down below, or I'll list all the numbers down below that I used in the description bar, so check that out if you have questions. So what I'm doing first is taking the lightest color. This is a really pale kind of lilac shade, and I am just flicking the color into the flower. I'm not completely covering every little bit of white space in the flower. I'm leaving it kind of messy, and this is what's going to create those highlights and dimension to the stamp. So I'm going to start with the lightest shade. Now this is my mid shade, and this I'm going to stick to the shadow areas. So edges of the petals, places where petals overlap each other, and into the center part of the flower. And I'm coming almost all the way out to the edge of the petals, but not quite. That way I'm leaving a little bit of that lilac to be the highlights at the end of the petals. So it looks a little difficult at first, but you'll see me do several of these flowers, and it really is, it goes by pretty quick. And again, I'm just kind of creating little flick strokes of the marker, so it's kind of streaky. I don't want a perfect even wash of color. After that second layer, I do go ahead and dry it just because my page is starting to get really saturated with ink. These markers don't bleed through, but I found that if I get more than those 2 layers when it's wet, it does start to bleed. So here's my third shade, and this is going to be the darkest shade of the flower, and this is going to be even closer to those shadow areas. So where the petals overlap, the center of the flowers, but I'm not going all the way over the top of that mid shade. You'll see it's kind of layered and stacked on top of each other. And this is what creates the highlights and the dimension to the stamping. And again, just those little flicking motions with the marker, and that's what creates texture on the petals of the stamping. And any petals that are underneath a flower next to it, I also make sure to have plenty of that shadowing. And then here I'm taking a darker marker for the center, and I'm filling in the center, but again, I'm leaving some white areas to be highlights, so I'm not completely covering the stamped image. So for this next flower, I'm going to use some yellows. So this is the palest yellow color that I have. It's actually kind of a tan color. And this is going to be the base. So I'm covering most of the flower, but again, leaving some areas that aren't colored. And once you get those 3 shades in there, it kind of ties everything together and you don't see all those missed spots. They just look like highlights on the petals. So I had gone to Lowe's the other day as it's finally getting to be spring weather here in Central California, and I was really inspired by all of the flowers in the garden section, and so I wanted to really incorporate some of that into this page. So I'm going to be using some pinks and yellows and purples and some like reddish purples in these flowers and just create a really vibrant, colorful bunch of flowers. So again, you can see here I'm drying after that second layer of color, and before I go in with the darkest shade. And I'm sticking to colors in the same family. So, you know, all pinks. I did use that kind of lilac shade, but it does tend to be a little bit pink, so it works with the pinks. This yellow, I'm sticking with all yellow. So a light yellow, a mid yellow, and a dark yellow. And that is how you create a more seamless blend. I do have a hard time getting these markers to have a seamless blend on a Bible page. They're not Copics or anything like that, but doing this technique where you're kind of flicking the color on helps things kind of blend in a little better. So I've gone ahead and sped this up while I go through the rest of these flowers. This one here is going to be in purples. So I will go ahead and just turn on some music and let you watch this process as I fill in all of these flowers. Okay, so I've gone ahead and filled in all of those flowers, and now we are going to work on the background. So I've picked 3 shades of blue, and we're going to do a similar technique where I start with the lightest shade first to lay down color. And filling in the backgrounds where you're really going to see how difficult it is to blend these colors on a Bible page, but I'm going to show you how I kind of fix that. So I'm just using up and down motions with the marker. I want all of my strokes kind of going in the same direction. So I'm not doing, you know, up and down, back and forth, diagonal. I'm trying to keep everything going in a vertical motion. And I'm just really laying down plenty of that light shade. And then now I'm going to go in with the mid color. And I'm going to create kind of an ombre effect at the top here. So it's going to look like this blue color is kind of fading out towards the top of the page. But here you can see where I'm having some difficulty getting that mid color to blend in with that light color. But I'm going to show you how I fix that here in just a second. So again, just saturating that, but then making sure after that second layer to hit it with my heat tool and dry it. And then now I'm going to go in with the darker color, keeping this closer to where the flowers are and at the bottom of the page. And even though these colors are pretty close, they are not blending like you would get with Copic markers, and Copic markers do bleed in your Bible, so that's why I want to avoid using those in my Bible. These markers I'll show you don't really bleed through. So I'm going back in again with the lightest shade to kind of help blend things in a little bit more. You can see the mid color and the light color are starting to blend, but not perfect. So here's how I compensate for that. I'm just taking that dark color where the dark color meets the mid color, and I'm just creating kind of a stippling effect. That way it kind of looks like that dark color is dissolving into that middle shade of blue. And then I'll do the same thing for this mid shade here. So here's where the mid shade fades into the lighter shade. I'm going to create a kind of a stippling effect, and this kind of helps the color dissolve into each other, but then it also kind of looks like this is intentional. It breaks it up a little bit. It's still not perfect, but it looks better than just those harsh lines between the three colors. And then I'll go back in with the lightest shade again and kind of help try to blend everything together. And you can see that looks much better than just those harsh jagged edges between the colors. And then I'm going to be doing my journaling at the top there, and so it's going to cover that up even more, and you're really not going to notice once the page is done that those didn't blend through 100%. And here you see here on the back, there's definitely heavily shadowing, and there is some bleed through from the STAYS-ON ink, but that the Faber-Castell markers don't actually bleed through the page. So here you can see I'm taking one of the cardstock stickers from the kit that says Free to Trust, and I'm just laying that down over the top of these flowers, and then I'm outlining it with the Illustrated Faith pen. And I'm also taking the word God from the Word Fetty stickers from Illustrated Faith, so that way that sticker says Free to Trust God. And so in today's devotion from Becca, she says, and I really like this, it says, I am free to trust because I know God is for me. I can lock eyes with him and see that he's not concerned. So I went ahead and just took that from the devotional and just wrote that right down into the margins here. And I really like what she said there. We're talking about the idea that you can fully trust God and his plan for you, even if it's not something that you understand or that you can fully see what's happening. He's doing it for your greater good. Now, whether that's to teach you something or to, bring you to a new path or something like that, it's all ultimately for your good, and that you need to trust that he's doing that. So I'm taking one of those pens and then just highlighting the verse. Again, that is Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a tab. So I'm using another one of these stickers. This is the little hexagon sticker from the kit. And I'm going to take some of the washi from the kit, and I'm going to create kind of a base at the top here for that tab. And then this is a sticker, but I'm going to show you how I kind of take care of the stickiness. I learned this from Tanya Hamilton. I will link her down below. You're just taking a little bit of baby powder and rubbing that over the stickiness that's exposed, and it completely gets rid of the stickiness. So now I can use that sticker as a tab, and it's not going to stick to anything as it sticks out at the top of my Bible. I'm taking the word trust. This is from the older Word Fetty stickers from the Genesis kit. And then I'm taking my date stamp, and that is it for this entry. So be sure to check the description bar down below. I'll have links to all of the products used in this video, as well as the numbers of the colors that I used from the Faber Castell pens. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed. I do try to post 3 times a week with process videos, tutorials, reviews, things like that. And also be sure to give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. And until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.